Hello, everyone. Welcome to the University of the Underground. We are a free, pluralistic, and transnational university founded in 2017. My name is Naum, and I am the head of program of I Want to Believe. I would like to welcome our participants and researchers, and to the visiting participants. If you're watching this, I kindly ask you to support this program and donate to the university. Today, we're going to have a 40-minute lecture followed by a 15-minute Q&A with our really special guest, Adah Parris. And Adah is an incredible human being, futurist, cultural strategist, systems designer and artist, a polymath, enthusiastic curator of people, patterns, and stories. Adah has been long-listed as one of the most influential women in the UK technology field. In 2019, she was recognized as one of the TED Talks Global Emerging Innovators. 2018, Adah was recognized as one of the top UK's 100 Black and minority ethnic leaders in technology. Right now, Adah is exploring and working in topics like the anatomy of transformation and innovation, ancient wisdom, natural systems, and indigenous community practices to digital and emerging technologies. So having said that, she will tell us about her ideas, her visions, and this very intriguing topic of cyborg shamanism. So Adah, the stage is yours.
Thank you, my friend Nahum. Hello, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here. It's lovely to meet you. God, always when they do those intros, I'm like, oh, it's so much. No pressure. It's a real pleasure to be here with you. So today I'm going to talk you through some of my thinking and my idea around this concept that I developed called cyborg shamanism. And then I'm going to then take you into, and at the end, I'm going to finish with an example of how this can manifest in life. So let's see, one of my art projects, let's make sure. Okay, two things. That and that. Right. You see the first slide? Yep, great. So a pattern is emerging in much of Western society. And I believe that what we're doing is we're looking for a new religion with using various types of forms of technology as a means of escaping what we call Plato's caves. We've lived in this kind of bubble before, and we're now in this place of looking for something bigger than ourselves, but we're using technology as a means of trying to get there. And humans are naturally, we're storytellers. We've always have been, but we use stories to help us kind of create meaning and solve problems. And we also use stories to help us understand and design our existence. And so there seems to be, when we start to look outside, there seems to be a shift in much of society that says that traditional religion isn't working, or it seems to be you can actually find research that's showing that the numbers in churches and people going to faith-based systems is actually declining. And I feel that what's happening is that we're looking for that same sense of connection and understanding through the use of various technologies. And what we're doing is we're using the similar rules and rituals to help us feel part of something that's bigger than ourselves, this kind of collective purpose, this sense of family, this sense of inclusiveness. So a couple of years ago, I met this guy, Livu Babitz, who's now a great friend of mine, who is a self-confessed cyborg. He runs a company called Cyborg Nest, and you'll see in the picture, he has this implant in his chest. And what it does is it essentially turns him into a human compass. So there's no data being shared, but what it does is it picks up magnetic north from the earth. And so when he faces, and I've got one, I haven't got it attached to me all the time, but I can tape it to myself because I wanted to try it. I'm that curious person. And so had it attached to him. And when it detects magnetic north, it vibrates. And so he can always orientate himself where magnetic north is and use it to find direction, to create relationship. But I was really curious and I said to him, well, why are you putting a technology, a piece of hardware into yourself? Why are you being a cyborg? Why do you feel that you need to be a cyborg? Why are you doing this? And he said three things. He said that he feels that it's future human and that the technology is helping him to understand his relationship with himself. Because as humans, we've lost some of those senses. You know, as humans in the global north, especially, we tend to have lost that innateness, that connection with wonder and everything. So he said that this is a way of him hacking himself to engage and bring up those senses. The second thing he said is that he feels that it's a way of helping him to connect with others, because there was a community. I think when they first developed the hardware, there was only 150 of them produced. And so there was this global community, and he thought it was going to be a particular type of person, but he said there were bankers and, you know, all sorts of people that had this hardware, and they became a community. So he's using the tech to connect with himself, to connect with others, and to connect with his environment, which for him is the earth, because it detected magnetic north. And so he felt that that was the trifecta of his relationship with technology. Now, for me, I'm a pattern recognizer, as Nahum said, you know, polymath, systems thinker, systems designer. And I tend to recognize patterns that occur in various worlds and various spaces that aren't necessarily always obvious. And sometimes I will go looking for those ideas, those patterns and those interconnections, because for me, that helps me to solve complex problems, because, you know, everything is connected. And so I was like, so you're using this hardware to connect with yourself, to connect with your environment, and to connect with others. You're using this technology. And I said, well, isn't that what people who go down the shamanic route do? That they will use plant medicine to connect with themselves, to connect with their environment, and to connect with others. So the word shaman is actually more complex than people think. And so it's not about a religious belief. It's not necessarily about a religious belief. It's more about understanding and actively seeking this other way of knowing, these other modalities of understanding and insights. I mean, we could go into the origins of the word, but I use the word shaman deliberately as a provocation to say, how can we go outside of the worlds that we know to try and find other ways of knowing, other understanding? And so at this point, Cyborg Shamanism was born, because I went, hold on, if we are all trying to connect with use tools to connect with ourselves, connect with our environment, to connect with others, then we're trying to achieve the same thing. The tools that we use are different. In one, it's hardware or algorithmic technology. In the other, it's plant medicine and the shaman. So I went, cyborg shamanism. And I believe that it was either side of the same spectrum. And so that led me to the question, okay, so if that's what we're doing, if that's what we are trying to achieve, why do we have this hierarchy in what technology is? And why do we have this hierarchy in algorithmic technology is better than shamanic technologies or indigenous wisdom? And I went, well, if we're doing the same thing, I want to bring all of those worlds together to try and solve problems, because I've just proven that there shouldn't be a hierarchy. And it then led me to the question of, okay, so if that's the case, if we're all using these tools to gain some sense of enlightenment, then what does it mean to be human? And what could we be capable of? And so I started mind mapping. I just went, okay, I don't know what the answer is yet, but I'm going to start mapping this out and dumping. Anytime a new idea came up, I would dump it on the mind map and just go, I'll find the patterns will start to emerge. 8 years later, I've got this beautiful and weird and wonderful mind map of all of these ideas that I had recognized across all of these different places, but realized that that's where cyborg shamanism was born. It was really about starting to ask myself these questions about, what does it mean to be human? What could we be capable of? And what are the technologies, tools, rituals, behaviors that help us explain some of that? And how can we bring all of these together? And then the more I looked, the more I started to recognize those three patterns in other worlds. How do we connect? How do we use technology to understand our relationship with ourselves, to validate ourselves? How are we using technology to connect with others, to widen the diversity in the room? And sometimes we do have an over-reliance on it. How are we using technology to connect with our environment? Jump too far. And then I started to notice these patterns are occurring in faith-based systems, in religion. And I had some conversations with some spiritual leaders and religious leaders, and when it's the same pattern that I'm seeing, that we are using a form, we're using something external to ourselves to try and connect with ourselves, to connect with each other, to connect with our environment. And again, it was the same three things. And so got to this point of going, oh, this must be, for me, this is how I define, I'm realizing that I'm defining technology in a different way. And then I had a conversation with a friend who was a quantum physicist, who knows as well. We met at the same place. And I said to her, look, this is what I'm seeing. And in the beginning, she said, you know, I don't believe in shamanism. I think it's out there. But when I described it in this way, that we're using these forms of technology, connect with ourselves, connect with our environment, to connect with others. She went, actually, that appears in quantum physics. It's the same pattern. So to me, all of those things suddenly became a technology. And I realized that it was no longer just a linear relationship, but it was cyclical. And a friend of mine actually described it as Dantes Inferno, that we kind of spin around in these things, going up and down, trying to reach these higher levels, the separation between it and us, always striving for that thing external to us, something bigger than us, but we're using technology. And so for the purposes of this presentation, whenever I talk about technology, that's what I mean, that we're using tools, whether digital, algorithmic, ecological, to connect with ourselves, to connect with our environment, and to connect with others. And I realized that actually everything is connected. And so for me, that was when I started to think, well, actually what we're talking about is systems thinking, the ability to solve complex problems through understanding this relationship that we have with this sense of there's a separation between it and us. We're using these technologies as a form of enlightenment, and actually the pattern is the same. There's belief systems. And so cyborg shamanism is actually about giving you a different perspective on the world. Asking yourself the question, what does it mean to be human, and what could we be capable of? And how can we bring and explore other ways of knowing and understanding into that process? So not only are we more aware of the different types of technologies of enlightenment, but we're also checking social media and going on all these different things. And I feel that the way that technology has been, we're creating these rituals and these patterns of behavior to help us address and understand and deepen our relationship with ourselves, our understanding of who we are, and our thoughts, and our understanding of us, our relationship and interrelationship with others. And so cyborg shamanism is fluid. It shouldn't be fixed. It's this idea that what we're doing through the process is recognizing the symbiotic relationship of these interconnected patterns, that these patterns occur in different worlds, these different ideas, different ideologies, different rituals, behaviors, and technologies, but ultimately they have the same intention. And so it's been a stepping stone for me to really start to deepen personal and professional, system of inquiry, to ask myself, now that I've seen this pattern, and this is how it started off as a big thought piece, just an idea. I didn't know how it was going to turn into anything. But how then can we use that to build trust and transparency? If in a world where the floor is constantly moving, where people have been othered because there was a perception that this technology is more powerful than this technology, this belief system is more powerful than this belief system, and this is better, and creating these hierarchies. And so the more I started to look into this, the more I started to think about merging the worlds of ancient wisdom, natural systems, indigenous community practices with the digital and emerging technologies, because the intention was always the same. So it became this process of then saying, well, if I've proven this, and the pattern occurs in quantum physics and religion and all these different things, then what we're also doing is we're changing the way that we're building new narratives to replace the over-reliance on the old narratives. And so we kind of bring us back to where we are now in the last year. So the pandemic, I believe, as devastating as it has been, I believe that the pandemic has also brought to the front a lot of opportunities and a lot of realizations. So I'm going to put out there and say that I think that because of what I've said, I do think that the virus itself is also a form of technology in the way that the definition I've just described it, because it's forced us as a species with those three things: to explore our relationship with ourselves, to explore our relationship with other, and to explore our relationship with our environment. And especially because during this time, what we realized is that the rules, that what we once perceived as normal is not normal. It wasn't normal if it ever was. And that we have this opportunity now to change, to really tackle those old realities, those old norms, those old stories and narratives that kept us in the world that we were. And so that we've been able to understand really the impact of our governing isms, our structures of capitalism, of patriarchy, of digital feudal spirituality, of all of these things. This pandemic, this time, with the lens of, for me, with the lens of cyborg shamanism, has been able to get us to think about, well, what is our role and responsibility, and how do those things happen, and what's our power, and what's our, how can we really connect and understand and try and think about how can we then use these insights to try and design new worlds, to create new narratives, to create new experiences. And so during the lockdown last year, the first lockdown in March, so just over a year ago, I had to shield, I had to stay at home because what have you. And I started to look out and was like, okay, so what are some of the patterns that I can see through the lens of cyborg shamanism? What are some of the things that I can see that are happening? Well, we became more aware of the divide, the inequalities in the world, the haves and the have-nots, the governing structures of how they were maintaining this idea of colonialism. And not just talking about land grab, but I'm talking about ideas of belief systems, of the way that we show up in the world. That there was the last year has really enabled us to see that divide and to question the powers and the belief systems that came through that. It's also made us more aware of our impact on the world, of the way that we spend, because when we all had to stop, we stopped spending in a particular way. I mean, online sales went up, but we stopped spending, we stopped distracting ourselves with all of these things. But there was this rise of the language of natural capital and this idea of we're trying to improve our relationship with the earth. And we also realized more that we have had such a big, profound impact on the planet. And being still and stopping because of the pandemic enabled more people to see that. And to see that actually we are this idea of a living system, that everything that we do, there is a cause and a consequence, and that looking through the lens of cyborg shamanism got us to see that. So I was looking and thinking, well, what is the connection between colonialism, capitalism, and climate change that we saw shift because of the pandemic? And I was like, that's the ego. Because we do these things because we can. Because we have people saying, we need to save the planet, we need to do all this stuff. So I'm going to, become a vegan, I'm going to stop flying, I'm going to do all these things. But then people would still say, well, I'm going to go to Bali and do a yoga retreat because I can. It was about the money, and realize that it's the ego that was driving all of this belief in that we need to keep this wheel turning. And so I called that initially the ecological triptych. And I use this image because it just really came out to me that the left was colonialism, the right was capitalism, and the middle was climate change. Sorry, the right was climate change, and the middle, the garden of earthly. So this is Hieronymus Bosch's The Garden of Earthly Delights. And it just really made me think about the way that we start to understand our belief systems and how we use those as narratives to maintain the status quo. And so with all of that in my head, I was like, well, if those are the problems that I'm seeing, what's the solution? How are we going to change some of this? And so I was fortunate enough to then be invited to facilitate a council of 90. So 90 Indigenous leaders from around the world who wanted to come together to create their manifesto for change and to create a council where they represented all Indigenous, as many Indigenous cultures together to help us start to address how are we tackling some of this. And I used Cyborg Shamanism and I used the ecological triptych as a lens to host those conversations. And what did they say? They said that what we need is we need a new hierarchy of needs. We need a new way of understanding and working out what are the base level, what are the most basic things that we need on this planet? What are the things that we as humans, as not just humans, what are the things that we need to help us really save the planet and have a better relationship with ourselves, with each other, and with the planet? And they said that we need to start by really changing that hierarchy of needs, because the original hierarchy of needs was created, and now his name has completely gone from my head, but there is photographic evidence that he actually went to the Blackfoot Nation. Maslow, there we go, thank you. Of course, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but there is evidence that Maslow went to the Blackfoot Nation Indigenous peoples and he stole the hierarchy of needs from them. And what he did is he flipped it on his head and put self-actualization at the top. So it was this idea that we as humans, we are striving for this at the top, when actually it should be the other way. That actually the most base level is that we should make sure that the sustainability of the planet is for all of us. And so then having that idea was like, okay, so this is what they're saying, that what we need in order to change, in order to understand ourselves, is to start with a new hierarchy of needs. And so that led me to then start to understand and think, look at, okay, so if we need to, step one is we need to leave the old ways behind and start to look at how we come up with this new value system for us as humans, for us as a planet. Step two is, what's our hypothesis for change? How are we going to take these new values and create this new hypothesis that we can then put out in the world to test? And so this hypothesis is really that we need new language, we need new stories, because most of the stories that we have been told, most of the narratives, follows this Joseph Campbell's idea of the hero's journey, in which there is one hero, usually a cis white male, that is, and it's a storytelling framework, that is, there's one hero, there is one journey, there is one shaman or guru to help that person, and that is going to be the way that things happen. That's going to be the way that things change. Well, the pandemic has, this pandemic has shown us that there's no one person coming to rescue us, and that actually we all have to go and work in this together. And so this is why when you start to look at it from that perspective and you start to think about the way that I've been describing technology and the way that I've been describing it, you realize that all of us have a piece of this puzzle. And we need to have a flatter structure, enables for all of us to be able to come together and recognize the value in these different ways of being, these different understanding, these different knowledge systems, these different technologies. And so we then think, okay, so we've got step one, we need to leave the old ways behind and create new value systems. Step two is we need to have new narratives. We need a hypothesis for change. Mine is new narratives, new language, because the old language, it wasn't working. So step three is, what are the tools, technologies, rituals, and behaviors that can help us to make this true? Well, we're currently in this era that is called the fourth or the fifth, depending on who you speak to and which publications you read, Industrial Revolution. And we use the word technology. And when we talk about technology, it tends to be synonymous with digital technology, you know, the mobile phone, algorithms, all of this lot. But I've just shown you that actually technology is more than that. To me, technology is a tool. It's not the answer, it's a tool. And the word itself originates from Greek, meaning systematic treatment of art, craft. So it's a technique. And so that we can use our perception to really understand what defines technology. And so for me, it's this idea of there's quantum technologies and digital technologies, computing. There are plant technologies, so psychedelics and entheogens and plant medicine. There are metaphysical technologies such as sound vibrations and energy fields. There are theological technologies such as religion and faith and belief systems. And they're all, the intention of all of them is the same, to help us understand our relationship with ourselves, with our environment and others, and how we connect. And so if we understand that to be true, or potentially true, then technology is a medium. It's an art, it's a craft, it's a technique that helps us understand and expand our curiosity, to be able to play, to innovate, to solve problems, but also to create new stories, new realities, to explore our relationships in and with various belief systems. And so I just wanted to show you some examples of how, when you start to bring those different worlds together of this belief system and technology to create this, there are some ways that I've seen of people starting to use this. And I just wanted to show you 2 examples.
In a dimly lit temple, worshippers gather to listen to ancient Buddhist teachings, delivered by a robot. The robot introduces itself as the Buddhist goddess of mercy. According to faith, this deity can appear in any form. The robotic preacher is known as Minda. It's the brainchild of temple steward Tensho Goto, who's hoping to bring worshippers closer to the divine.
Many Buddhist statues have been made, but they were all just Buddhist images, standing or sitting figures. I wanted to create a Buddhist statue which can speak, make eye contact, and answer questions so that people can feel closer to it.
And then this is going down the more shamanic indigenous route. And so I just wanted to show you those as examples of how, when we're starting to think about the role of technology and bringing these spirituality together, there are some really interesting ways in which people are starting to think about how we believe and what it is we do and how we start to do that. So then that led me to guiding to, you know, part number 4. The question I tend to ask is, what kind of ancestor do you want to be? If you're having this belief system, you're using these different tools and technologies to connect with yourself, to connect with your environment, to connect with others, that can have these profound impacts that people are starting to use them to design and to create new spaces and to create new connections. What kind of ancestor do you want to be? You know, I sometimes have the job title of futurist, which is an interesting one, and we can have a side conversation about that. But it's this people expect you to have this kind of crystal ball to be able to look into the future and say, this is what's going to happen. But actually, that's not how I look at it. I look at what I do as an opportunity to world build, to really think about thought-provoking, seemingly existential questions about the nature of origin and origin of our belief systems. Remember, cyborg shamanism is deliberately provocative to get us to think about what does it mean to be human, what could we be capable of, and how can we break out of those linear ways of thinking to be able to co-design and co-create the futures that we want. And so following those principles, you know, that's the big question I always ask people, my clients, anybody, anything that I'm doing, it's always that. So this, you know, the next bit is really about how that question, what kind of ancestor do you want to be, is really about the viability and sustainability of what we're designing. You know, it's not, there's a Senegalese quote that says, the future emerges from the past. And I love that because it reminds us that we are still connected to the past, and we have to look back and really understand those relationships. You know, because when people say, oh, you're a futurist and you've got this and predict, tell me what the future is going to be, tell me where I should put my money. That's not how it works. But we can look back and really look for those connections and really start to understand the intention of some of these ideas and the narratives and the rituals and the behaviors that can help us in our design process. And so the next bit, the last bit of this whole framework is really around, so how do we leave the old ways behind to come up with new value systems? What is our hypothesis for change? What are the tools, technologies, rituals, behaviors that we need to help us start to really try and bring some of this true? What kind of ancestor do you want to be? The fifth one is, how do you build a form of kinship and citizenship? How do you ground this down? So in Nigeria, the Igbo tribe have this concept of Mbari, which is a sacred ritual, and it's a rite of passage where they see art as a form of citizenship. And what they do is, you know, that it's a celebration to a particular Orisha, deity or god or goddess. And people from the village are chosen to go and live in this particular house and to build this house and to work together. And this is a belief system, but it's also coming together. And so is the house a technology? Is the process a technology? The way that I've defined it, it's really about understanding how we bring all of this together. And so regardless of what we call ourselves, whether we're artists, designers, futurists, storytellers, activists, the ultimate goal is to create this sense of belonging and community, not just with humans, but with all living things, to create ideas and products and services that will have a personal, cultural, economic, technological, and ecosystem impact on the world. And so I suggest that what we need to do is we need to be more explicit in our values, and recognize that we need those new hierarchy of needs that are based on our belief systems and values. We need new languages, we need a new storytelling frameworks, we need new and emergent hypotheses for change that are inclusive of, not extractive, inclusive of the knowledge and wisdom and rituals and technologies of those who've been othered. Because we've created these divides, and actually what we can do is bring them back together. And so I'm just going to quickly show you how I've been working with this framework. So again, I start with that question, and this is a project that I've been doing. So I've been an artist in residence at the Buckminster Fuller Institute and the University of California, Irvine, they are artist incubators to try and help people to look at how we can use art and technology to help people understand their relationship with the planet. And so I started with a question, what kind of ancestor do you want to be? The Kogi tribe are Colombian indigenous peoples who use a cave as a form of technology. What they do is they are so connected with the planet that what they do is they take some of their young, when they're young, and put them into a cave, and this social isolation, they're in this cave for 9 years, and they become so attuned to the earth and the planet that they are almost, it's almost like their shamanic training. And so I took this idea of the cave, this understanding that they use the cave as a form of technology, and decided to create a virtual cave. But to remove language, to create, to enable, to make sure that it was, that it wasn't that people could have access to it, that it could scale, that it was inclusive. I removed all form of language, all spoken language. And so it's a sound cave. And so what I did was created this virtual cave that is through sound that helps people go on this journey, this shamanic journey of understanding our relationship with the planet. So going through the same phases that I've just taught you through. Phase 1, leave. What do we leave behind? I wanted people to leave their egos behind. So when you go through this cave, enter this sound cave, you go through this shamanic experience where you leave your ego behind. And it's kind of ego death. So it was a sensory, and I did loads of research into the sounds and the frequencies and all sorts of things, what happens in those experiences of ego death that shaman and indigenous cultures use. And I created that in the soundscape. And as you go through that and you get to this ego death, you get to the other side and you start to recognize the interconnectedness. You see the world for what it really is. And I use the sound of forest fires and trees falling to represent deforestation. And then the second phase is the hypothesis for change. So it was breathe. We've gone from sensory isolation to sensory integration. Remember, you're in this cave, this sound cave. And this was about reestablishing the relationship between the brain and the body and taking the breath. And so I use the sound of a baby crying as that first breath. This is our hypothesis for change. And that helps you to think about, well, what does breath really mean? What does it stand for? What does it mean to be able to breathe? And then we move into phase 3, which was about grow and the tools and technologies and rituals. And this is about kinship. And this is Keshak, a performance that was a chanting and a movement of another indigenous tribe of people. And it gets you to think about, well, what patterns, how do we communicate? Where do we see these patterns emerging? And the last one, what kind of ancestor do you want to be? Was about water, and we flow. How do we carry this message? How do we make it impactful? How do we scale? And this is where it became about ecosomatics, this embodiment of what we're experiencing. And it subtly nudges us to think about the unintended consequences of the decisions that we make. And the last bit, the 5th one, as I said, is ground. And this was about emergence from the cave and grounding down these new realizations, these new ideas. Or as author Daniel Quinn says in his book, Ishmael, which if you haven't read, I highly recommend it. It's a beautiful book. He says, once you learn to discern the voice of mother culture humming in the background, telling her story over and over again to the people of your culture, you'll never stop being conscious of it. Wherever you go for the rest of your life, you'll be tempted to say to the people around you, how can you listen to this stuff and not recognize it for what it is? And so I am going to play you, the soundscape is 25 minutes. I'm not going to do that, but I'm going to play you 4 minutes of the soundscape. So I'm going to ask you all to close your eyes, and hopefully you've all got headphones on. And then I am going to play you a bit of the soundscape. Noam, if you can't hear it, let me know, okay? Right, yeah. It started. And so that was you walking into the cave. Those were the last steps. And so, in conclusion, the question for all of you is, where do your values come from? What are your values? If you're going to start down this journey of looking at belief systems, think about your own values. Where did you get them from? What are they? And where did you get them from? Thank you. I'm Adah Parris. Hopefully you found that interesting.
Thank you so much, Adah. Thank you. Thank you. And yeah, maybe we have some questions around. So let's start with Ruth.
Hi, Anna,
Hi.
thank you so much for that presentation. It was incredible. It's like my favorite one that we've had so far, I think.
It's a bit out there.
Yeah, because it's like so many of my interests. Like I've done a lot of shamanic rituals and trainings myself, and I'm also like super into technology, so it's really cool. And with my my project, I started to look into like going back to Northern Ireland, where I'm from, because I spent a lot of time doing plant medicine and things like that from Peru and looking at those traditions, and I was like, okay, well, why not look at where I come from? And yeah, my question, I guess, is because I really believe in this myself, in bringing together like the traditions and technology, but what about still holding space for people who want to still believe in other religions, like having the plurality still, and without like forcing something on people, like, because also starting to look back in the history, I was looking at St. Patrick, who drove the snakes out of Ireland, and there were never any snakes in Ireland. It's a representation of the kind of ancient knowledge of like the Kundalini and self-empowerment that the Druids used to have. So yeah, it's kind of like how to do this without forcing it on people, or to kind of bring everybody in.
Great question. I am not trying to force anybody to think anything. I think what I'm doing is recognizing and celebrating those differences, and saying that each of those different belief systems and faith systems, and are there shouldn't be. I don't believe that there should be a hierarchy in the belief systems and the faith systems. I think that they are different, and that they are valid for those different environments. So my heritage is, I was born here in the UK. My father was Igbo Nigerian. My mum is Guyanese Amerindian. And when I was growing up, I used to flip between the two and go, oh, well, I'm more this now, and now no this, and now this. And actually, it's taken me a long time to be able to bring all of those different things together. And it's a bit like that, the way my friend described it, and I use the image, is that Dantes Inferno and Paradiso. I used to think that, right, I've done meditation, so this is it. Meditation is the answer. That is the way. I am enlightened. That's it. I don't need to do anything else. And then I would discover something else and go, oh no, wait, sound meditation. No, sound meditation is a thing. This is it. I'm enlightened. It's wonderful. And then it'll be something else. And so it's this, what I believe is, you have to find out what's right for you, and you have to find the bits. And it's a bit, the way I do it is a bit of this and a bit of that and a bit of this, and it changes depending on where I'm at. So that's why I know when I was younger, it was more African side, and then more Caribbean side, and more this, and actually that it's funny, because I've had conversations with people from different faith systems, and they all think that I celebrate, I'm a believer in their faith. So I've had conversations with Buddhists who say, oh, you must be Buddhist. And I've had conversations with Muslim, oh, you must be Muslim. And you must be Jewish, you must have Jewish heritage in you, and you must be, I was brought up Catholic convent school. But it's because I am in a space now where I acknowledge the differences and celebrate those differences and recognize that there's value in each of them. It doesn't mean that they're wrong. And that's what I try to do through my work as well. So hopefully that answered some of your question. Yeah, okay.
Excellent. Chloe?
Hi, thank you so much. I wanted to ask about, with the letting go of the ego, and you spoke about that, and then you also spoke about looking at the origin of our belief systems, and I wondered about a lot of religions talking about life after death and the afterlife, and you didn't speak about that today, and I wondered whether that's because of the types of spirituality you're interested in, or because perhaps you connected that with ego.
No, it's just trying to fit as much as I can in the presentation without overwhelming you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's that. One of my really, I mean, so I, what do I believe? I believe that as humans, we will not have the answers to everything. And that it's also very arrogant of us to think that this planet in this solar system is the only inhabited place. I also believe that there is a sacred knowledge and wisdom that comes from plants and nature. They were here before us. They are not here for us. And we have, I think that our relationship, even the word nature is colonialistic. And if you understand where it came from, then you really understand. So I'm really into the etymology and understanding where words come from. So even the word nature irritates me because it was divisive. It was deliberately to create this division. And so, yeah, so I do have many experiences. So at the moment I'm on a course called the Living Systems course, taught by systems philosopher Frio Capra, which is fascinating. And a lot of it initially went over my head because he's talking about life on a cellular level. And I was like, oh God, I didn't do biology at school. But what he talks about is the fact that, you know, a living system is a self-organizing system, and that we have a consciousness in our cells, and that our cells will understand and connect with everything. And so I was able to ask Capra himself last week. He attended our study group, and a friend of mine is one of the researchers at the Imperial College Psychedelic Research Center. And so I was like, Capra's coming to the course. What question do you want me to ask him? So he went, okay. So the question I asked Capra was, so remember, he's talking about understanding ourselves on this very microscopic level. And so the question I asked Capra was, from my friend, is, does he believe that that psychedelics and altered states of consciousness can be a gateway to us understanding our relationship with ourselves, that cell consciousness? And he said, yes. He said, of course, you know, that he said, of course, because what he said that psychedelics and altered states of consciousness do is remove the barriers that we've been put up there. You know, that I talk about colonialism. Colonialism is barriers. He said what it does is it removes those barriers and enables us to really connect with ourselves on the cellular level and understand those relationships. Well, for me, that is a new system. That's me understanding systems thinking and understanding, well, okay, so now if I study living systems, I can apply that to anything else. So now what I'm doing is I'm taking my understanding of living systems and overlaying it with the work that I'm doing. Is that a good answer? Helpful? Yeah, okay.
Great. Celeste.
Hi. Thank
Hi.
you so much for that talk. It was really great. Yeah, so I just had a question, kind of more wondering if you had any plans in future for any other tech or kind of implants that you would actually specifically want to try, maybe along the lines of like the seismic earthquake implants that like Moon Rebus had, or if there's anything else in particular that you want to connect with, like personally.
Oh, I'm very excited. You can tell, as Naeem says in my intro, enthusiastic curator of people, patterns and stories. You can all see the enthusiasm just bubbles out. If I was standing on this, he'd see me on stage. If I'm on stage, it's like this. I'm moving all over the place. But I have been fortunate enough to get to be offered a artist residency and scholarship for the summer. So there is the Santa Barbara Center for Art, Science and Technology. Santa Barbara is the home of psychedelic research. But he has also, the artist there, Alan Macy, who set it up, he has created this way of understanding our relationship with our bodies and technology. And so I'm going to go and study with him for 6 weeks over the summer to really understand how to take my framework, Cyborg Shamanism, and the soundscape, and to turn it into an embodied experience. So I've bought myself an Apple Watch, and I've just ordered a new piece of tech called Synapse Wear, which will monitor blood pressure levels and environmental levels and CO2 and all of those things. I'm probably going to buy an Aura ring because I realized that you can hack them as well. And so what I'm doing is my whole practice now is about embodiment. So rather than, I spent a lot of time, 8 years mind mapping. I could have done a PhD in that time. I wish I had started, but I didn't. But what I'm doing now is I'm tracking my sleep and understanding how that impacts everything. I'm tracking my emotions and all of these things. Part of what we're doing, my co-founder Marcus lives in LA. And what we're doing is today, the call before this was with the lawyers to set up the new company. So what we're doing is we're building this UK hub called ism.earth. And there's going to be different elements to it. So there is a global community already. I can send a link so people can sign up, and then we can do that. There is a global community. There is this, there's a collab. So in the summer, what we're going to do is we have been given access to a ranch in Montana, and we're going to take Cyborg, the soundscape, and we're creating a 5-day land-based experience with horse whispering and listening to the land and working with Indigenous peoples to try and understand what the land needs to do that. We've also then got this building the media lab when we've got this anti-disciplinary, and it's amazing that when people recognize their own stories within what you're doing, they start to volunteer themselves or offer to support you. So we've been able to build this amazing team of technologists, a neuroscientist from MIT, and all sorts of weird and wonderful, and I say weird affectionately because I class myself as weird, people who are helping us to build a physical immersive experience. So we'll take the soundscape and think secret cinema, but with VR and skin tracking technologies. And so I'm in the process of trying to understand how they work on me before I start doing them with other people. But it's really exciting because we've started this, I started this process by recognizing that pattern. And now I'm in a place where we've got people talking about skin galvanic, I don't know, Marcus knows more about it than I do, stuff about as part of the experience that people will be able to breathe, and we will be able to visualize their breath and take that breath, those visualizations, and mint them to the blockchain as a living, breathing work of art. So it's this, for me, the boundaries that most people will put around things, I don't look at them as that. I just go, well, I want to do this. How am I going to work out how to do it? Because I can see that there's a connection. So that's the exciting piece that's happening next.
All right, Kayla.
Hi. I was curious about in your exploration of the word cyborg, is there a physical proximity to like is there a parameter of physical proximity to technology and to nature, or is there also like a level of conceptual engagement, and then kind of in the same vein, I'm curious if you see like a natural growth to technology in like with an algorithm, like if that can grow in the same way nature can.
Ooh. So Marcus is a cyborg anthropologist, and so he would be able to have a better kind of academic conversation around what that is. For me, I try and bring things down to this simplest definition. And for me, a cyborg is somebody who enhances themselves in some way with technology. And so cyborgs have been around for years and decades. Anyone's got a pacemaker. cochlear implant. I would consider myself, could potentially consider myself a cyborg because I wear glasses. And so it's using, for me, it's about using the technology to augment or enhance in some capacity. Augment or enhance our biological selves in some capacity. And so like Moon Rebus has the seismic, and Neil Harbison has the antenna, Livu has the implant. I should have got mine out because I've got one of those things as well. And so I think that for me, that's where that bit starts. But it's interesting because currently we are hosting 6-hour conversations on Clubhouse. And what we're doing is taking, I created an alphabet for Cyborg Shamanism. So I looked at all of those words I've just described to you. And I said, what's the A word that shows up, is present in all of those? Anthropomorphism. We create these technologies we try to create these technologies in our image. B is balance, C is curiosity, D is diversity, E is experimentation, flow, human. On Sunday, this Sunday, I will send the link. We're doing interoception. I'm sorry, sticking fingers up, interoception. And the reason I'm talking about this is because our definition and understanding of words varies so much that it's not, we try to make words binary, and they're not, because they're in relation to they have context and meaning for each of us as individuals. And so what we're doing with these Clubhouse conversations is looking at what's the range of meaning and understanding of those words, and then kind of unpicking what are the common threads, not just what the definition is, but what are the common threads of how they show up. And so we're building this kind of platform to be able to explore the origins and nuances of those words. So when you ask about cyborg, that's why I said Marcus can describe it in one way. I will have another way to describe it. And somebody else, look up the work of Amber Case. She's great. So there's Donna Haraway who wrote Cyborg Manifesto, which is actually seen as a feminist manifesto. That's where I kind of started my workings looking at cyborgs. And then what I can do is Nahum, I can send you a link of references and things that I've read that I find really interesting. I think you should all have a look at. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. So Ada, I know that there are still a couple of questions.
I'm happy to stay. I'm fine.
Fine.
If people want to stay, if you can, then I'm happy.
Okay. I can stay 10 more minutes. I want to be respectful of
I will keep
time.
my answers shorter.
So let's do these questions that are waiting, which are Rachel and Tutti Frutti. So Rachel.
Mine actually got answered.
Fantastic.
What was your question, by the way?
Thank you. That was such an amazing talk.
Thank you. What was your question?
Oh, just about which technologies you were thinking about. You've already answered it.
Oh,
so.
all of them. All of them.
Thank you.
Okay, that's okay. Then Francisco.
Yes, thank you. I was wondering, when you bring these new cosmogonies to your clients, do you provide like context to them to, go over the genealogy of those cosmogonies, that is just not picking up something and curating, as you call it, and just making like a sort of a commodity and bringing it to your corporate clients?
Oh, so you're asking me, how do I maintain a level of authenticity as well around introducing it to corporates? So the land-based project, so with the company that we're building, there are different elements. So the collabs is going to be business to business mostly, and what we're looking at with that is that is around helping business leaders to become critical thinkers and systems thinkers. So I go into corporates now and talk about systems thinking and living systems. They're like, what are you talking about? But getting them to understand it. And so the way that Marcus and I are looking at doing it is to create these embodied experiences. So before you get into the head, before we get into the intellectualizing and all of that, you have to experience it. And this is what I've learned through the Living Systems program with Capra and the University of California in Irvine, is that we're very, very mindful about the extractive nature that has been used around Indigenous practices and Indigenous technologies and knowledge and wisdom. And so that's why we have this community around us to help make sure that we do remain authentic. And then what we also do is we have I collect quotes. And there was whenever I'm about to produce a workshop or a talk or anything, I always go back to the same quote. And it is, the purpose of a storyteller is not to tell you how to think, but to give you questions to think upon. And so that's what I do when I go into my corporates and, in all of these places is I'm not going and going, I'm the expert, because for me, that's me with my ego going in. And with all the work that I'm trying to do, I am trying to make sure that I check in where my own ego comes into this. I'm not going in and saying, this is the answer and I'm the one that's got it right and this is going to, I'm going in saying, I want you to think differently. I want you to ask yourself the questions that you probably have avoided asking, or the word didn't even occur. Because if I can get you to ask yourself more questions, then it means that you've lent in. It means that you've taken something away. It means that you're curious. That is how we do it, that we help to provoke that curiosity within people. And then they will start to ask questions and start to, because for me, ultimately, it's helping people to recognize their own patterns. I've just recognized mine and I've shared that with you, but we should all be able to, we all have the capacity to do that. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an answer. Yeah.
Thank you.
And somebody said, the contact slides.
Yes. Yeah, so if they want to get in touch with you.
Yeah, I will just share. Hold on, actually. The other element that I didn't add that I also include in this is that I am also the chair of Social Enterprise Mental Health First Aid England. And so I also bring in the understanding of what's the impact of all of this on our mental health and well-being. What's the impact of everything that I'm doing, which is why this is why I get so excited, because I'm bringing in all of these different elements of going, okay, so we're talking about belief systems and we're talking about religion and we're talking about plant medicines and all of this stuff. Hold on, I just put all of that's all of my links in there. But I'm also very mindful of the impact on mental health and well-being and what does that actually mean. And so being the chair of that and having that insight as well becomes a part of this journey.
Fantastic, Adah. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it was so brilliant.
I see some of you on Sunday. It starts at 6 o'clock British Summer Time, 6 p.m. British Summer Time, and it will last for 6 hours on Clubhouse. So if you go to Clubhouse, ism.earth is the room. And this week, the theme is interoception, which is about the body-brain connection.
Yes, we will be there. I still have to join one of your Clubhouse.
Yes, I know. Mariposa, if there's time, yes, quickly. Yeah. Yes.
Yes, okay.
Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, about, do you have any insight into Mexican shamanism?
Not myself directly, but I have friends and I have contacts that, and so I love the fact that whenever I speak to new people, I gain some insight and then it just overlays. So if you've got some, please share.
I would love to, yes.
Yes? Okay, great. Hold on.
Thank you.
Hold on, that's not Santa Daime, is it?
Pardon?
Is it Santa Daime?
No, no. It is the research of a Mexican scientist who disappeared in 1994. He was studying the Mexican shamans, and apparently the CIA kidnapped him, and there is some documents of him approved by the CIA and interesting stuff.
Yeah, I saw something the other day that was talking about that a lot of the people who start to do research into shamans disappear. But it's interesting that there has been a groundswell in people traveling to Peru and, you know, places to do ayahuasca and plant medicine and all of these things. And to Ruth's point about recognizing that there are plants in the places where we are from that are also indigenous, and that it doesn't have to be. And I'm quite interested in the relationship between our biological beings and the plants of those places. I think that there is a I think that there could be a real difference in the relationship that we have with them and the celebration. So to your point about mentioning about snakes, have you read The Cosmic Serpent, the book? Oh, Ruth, you need to read The Cosmic Serpent, because it's fascinating. And I will stop talking now, don't worry. But The Cosmic Serpent is a brilliant book that talks about why is it that around the world there are images of snakes, and the snakes are intertwined like this. The idea is that the knowledge and understanding that those snakes represent the DNA, and that the knowledge of recognizing that comes through plants, but we had to ingest the plants to be able to know which combination to put them in, to be able to then be able to see everything else. So it's this kind of chicken and egg thing, but really it's all linked to snakes, which is why I have a big snake tattoo on me as well. Okay, I'm going to stop.
Okay.
It's been great speaking to you all. I hope to see you all again.
Thank you so much, Adah. Yeah, I really wanted you to be part of this program.
Thank you.
And yes, I'm sure everyone enjoyed it as much as I did. So I know we stretched it a little bit today. So everyone, thanks so much. See you in tutorials tomorrow. Prepare, show, don't tell. And see you tomorrow. Have a good rest of the day. Ciao.
Bye.